And yep. And so this will go posted on the RAC YouTube channel and some of our social media platforms after the fact with, I'll fix up the captions a little bit at that point so that they're all accurate and good. And I think we just also want to acknowledge here at RAC that we are really working on our accessibility offerings, and we are imperfect at this point. And I apologize for that. And I want to note that it's something that we're working towards. And if you have feedback or comments about something that you wish would have been offered tonight as far as accessibility goes, please let me know. And we will do our best to provide that post the conversation and send you a recording or whatever you need. I think I'm gonna say we are small enough that if you want your video on, it's totally fine. It's okay to keep it off. Please do keep yourself muted during the conversation, just for, you know, everyone else's sake. We have two panelists with us. Panelists, is it a panel if it's two? Two artists tonight with us in conversation. I'm guessing we actually have a lot of artists with us tonight, but two that we're going to be hearing from. And you are welcome to ask questions of them at the end of this. We're going to save about 15 minutes for questions. Feel free to just like keep your question in your head or jot it down and save it to the end. Or if you'd rather put it in the chat, you're welcome to do that. And I will keep track of those and make sure that they get asked at the end too. I think that's all I have. Let me know if you have any questions. You can message me directly in the chat. Again, my name is Anna. I'm going to be putting some links in here, but I think let's just get started. I will introduce my colleague Salvador and actually just hand it off to you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna, so much for the greeting and also all your help organizing this with me. Hello and welcome, everyone. This is a really nice size, actually. I'm really happy to see. It does feel really intimate, along with this gray weather we're having, at least here in Portland. So appreciate all of you joining us to hear from the two fantastic artists that are taking part in today's conversation, which is part of the programming offered by RAC's Public Art Murals program. My name is Salvador Mayoral. I'm part of RAC's public art team. My role is mainly managing public art projects and overseeing the aforementioned murals program. And I will also be moderator tonight. So before we meet the artists though, I just want to share a little bit about how this series, which is called Here and There, came to be. Over the last 5 to 6 years, we here at the Regional Arts and Cultural Council have heard directly from muralists expressing their desire to learn from each other in more intentional ways. Two things that stand out about that desire is a wish for peer-to-peer education and also creating and building relationships with other creatives. So in an effort to address and serve these needs, over the last year, we've been engaging and brainstorming with various community members, artists, and other RAC staff. I particularly want to shout out our murals committee, who've been an integral part of this. And for those folks, one of them is joining us today, Jason Powers. Hi, Jason. So one of the ideas that has risen to the surface in these brainstorming sessions has been creating space for muralists to have a dialogue about their practice, including how and why they do what they do as artists. So on top of that, we thought it would be doubly interesting to have the dialogue take place between a local muralist and another muralist in a different part of the country. Technology has increasingly become part of our lives as a way to connect with each other, especially in the last year and a half. And we think there's something really special about having artists connect and converse when they have an opportunity, when they might not have an opportunity otherwise. So tonight's conversation is the first of 3 conversations that we'll be hosting between now and October. Next month's conversation on September 23rd is between local artist Alex Chu and Katie Yamasaki from Brooklyn, New York. And then the third conversation is happening on October 21st between local artist Darren Todd and Jake Fragua, who is based in Tucson, Arizona. We understand that knowledge sharing is important, and we hope this series will be interesting and insightful for other muralists and to the overall public that acknowledges, appreciates, and engages with murals and art you experience throughout your day outside. So yeah, with that being said, let's get into this. So to get the conversation, I would love Cece and Kyra. Can you both tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Cece, would you like to go first or?
Sure. So hello, everyone. It's good to see, familiar faces and new faces, and definitely honored to be invited to this conversation and have this conversation with Kyra and the rest of the folks over at RACS. So it's been long anticipated, and I'm excited to be kicking it off with you all tonight. I'm from Oakland, by ways of Oakland Bay Area, by ways of the Philippines. I came to the United States when I was 12, and I'd been kind of in practice of drawing and painting since I could remember. But as of now, I've painted pretty much in different places throughout the world, from Europe to Asia to Latin America, and obviously here in the Bay Area is kind of where my headquarters is. But I guess we're going to go a little bit deeper as we go through the conversation about what it is that we're painting and how we go about doing our work. But yeah, I'm an illustrator, I'm a painter, I'm a muralist is kind of what I'm known by. It's kind of been my trade. Been doing this for over 15 years now. And also do some arts education as well as arts administration and the different hats and the different roles I play. So having some versatility and knowing kind of just the different spaces in which we conduct and how we conduct this work. So I'm excited to learn from you all tonight and also share some of my experiences in having been doing this work for quite some time now.
Well, my name is Kyra. I don't want y'all to kick me out the group. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I started my solo public art career here in Portland. And I've been actually muraling for, how old will I be? For 12 years. I started when I was 15. But for the most part, at 15, doing murals, it was kind of like a summer camp thing. A summer camp where we fortunately got paid. They thought it was, it was, in our best interest for us to learn about finances at such a young age. So I was very fortunate to really have an early start in muraling. And so I pretty much got my foundation on how to mural and the behind the scenes of what it takes to make a mural happen through a program called Artworks. But now, as an independent artist doing work for myself, being here in Portland, I'm really learning about the business side of things. So hopefully that's something we can get into, because I know that's a lot of what people may want to hear about. And yeah, I've been here in Portland for 2.5 years and been doing public art full-time, public art and personal commissions for about a year now since being here. And I'm excited to share all that in this conversation with you guys. Yeah, I'll pass it off to Salvador.
Thank you both for those introductions and also just grounding us in like who you are and getting this conversation started. So I'm just gonna open with like just a general conversation, especially hearing your journeys. Like, why did you both get into mural making? I'd love to know a little more about that in particular.
Yeah. Oh, I'll go.
Okay. Okay.
And then I'll pass it off to you. Well, for me, it started with like I think every child's first language is learning how to make gestures and learning once they pick up some sort of mark making utensil is drawing. Like every child is drawn to creating having an imagination and creating that in some sort of way into their universe. You know, I look at my nephew now, I'm helping raise my nephew, he's 7 years old. And just from the time of his birth to now, just seeing how curious he is of the world and how his imagination just runs rampant, and that's in all of us. So I think innately I've been an artist since birth, but what made me realize that I really want to pursue this is funny. It started with my very first self-portrait. There's a picture that my grandmother had of me that was taken in kindergarten, and I replicated it. And I look back at that picture every year around my birthday, which is coming up September 12th. So if y'all want to shoot me a gift for that. And I look at this portrait that I did of myself, and right now I think it was ugly, but at the time I drew it, I was like, I'm the greatest thing walking. I'm so talented. You know, I really believed in myself and having that portrait created. And I ran with it. You know, I knew that if I stick to something, if I was consistent with something, whatever it was, I'm a very determined person, I'll take it far. So around middle school, having made that, how old was I? I was 14. So around high school, junior high, I made this portrait and I'm like, okay, art is what it's gonna be. I got to high school and there were these flyers that said, make art, get paid. And I'm like, I like art. I wanna get paid. Let me see what these flyers are about. There was a program, a nonprofit in my city that employed youth to paint murals. And that's how I got my foot in. Just starting from one, having that innate love for art that I think we all have, and then deciding to be consistent with it. And then there was an opportunity. So it started with like having a drive, then having an opportunity, and then, you know, making the most of the opportunity. And then I moved to Portland, which is a whole nother story. And that's kind of how I got into muraling. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a true believer that, you know, was something that Kyra just kind of mentioned, that if you can walk, you could dance, and if you could, you know, if you could talk, you could sing, and if you could write, you can draw. And similarly, I mean, I think that was definitely such a big part of my own cultural lineage. As I mentioned, I grew up in the Philippines in kind of like a farmer village town. And grew up with my great grandmother who was illiterate. She didn't read or write. And so a big part of our communication as I was growing up was through drawing images and things that she might not be aware of because it's things that I've learned in school, and wanting to be able to communicate that. She was my road dog. So we was tight, and wanting to be able to share with her all the different things when I wasn't with her. And drawing became such a big part of how we communicated with each other. And as an adult, I find that still to be true, and ways that visual art still becomes my means of communication to the world. But beyond that, it's also been my means to engage with it. Having came here, growing up, since I came out here when I was about 12 in San Francisco. And, you know, as English being a second language, I found visual art or drawing and things as kind of a big part of how I engage socially with the folks in school and, you know, folks and friends. And it was something that I found comfort in when words just wasn't enough, and when I couldn't find the words to explain some of my thoughts and some of my feelings. And again, I mean, I think there's a still big part of that that's still very true today, though, you know, I've kind of improved my handle and my navigation with English and whatnot. But it's, I think, you know, when they say pictures can say 1,000 words, I found that to be very true in my own life experience, and still very true to having taught, you know, students from elementary school up to college, and even up until, you know, in various communities ranging from the age of 7 to the age of 70. I mean, I've had students who were like way older than me with a lot more life experience, but wanting to really learn this craft, which I think is also what made me fall in love with it, is knowing that it is a craft that we can carry for a really long time. And I know that it's been the one craft that has been consistent in my life. So I've always drawn, and I've learned to draw with colors on the streets, out in public spaces where when you don't have studios, or when that's kind of such a big part of my learning, growing up in the city, coming from like a village to a city, the streets became kind of like our walls of schools. And just remember looking up in walls throughout San Francisco, where I started recognizing images and folks and people that kind of looked like me, that shared similar, or if not, some sort of similarities with stories, and just being really awed by that, and knowing that that's what I wanted to do. And now, like, a lot of those, like, I could probably take you all on a tour throughout the Bay and point out, like, a good chunk of those artists, and knowing those artists, having collaborated, or just knowing them, just having been doing this on the field for a long time. So it's kind of, in some ways, it's also a place in which I found community. It's a place in which I found where I belong, and it's always a consistent reminder of home in the different places in which I've been. So it's definitely something that, is amazing, and it's a way to express myself, but in so many ways, it's also been the thing that I've actually embraced me. So it's been a blessing being able to find a craft that I feel like not only, folks have always said like, oh, thank you for your work, because you're allowed to tell stories that sometimes it's just not really told. Like, a lot of stories of women of color, working class women of color, we just don't get to see our perspective all the time in like big media. And I feel like public spaces, common spaces, has become a space for me to kind of really feel empowered to tell our stories. And it's been an amazing, some people call it a gift, but for me, I think it's such an amazing release and blessing. It feeds me as much as I hope that some of our work feeds the many communities that we've worked with as well. So
I really appreciate you saying that, Cece. And actually that segues into the question I have for both of you. And for folks, we've included both Cece and Kyra's Instagram. So folks are not aware or curious, please feel free to browse. But can you both just share with us, like, what exactly do you paint? And Cece, you've already touched on a little bit about that, but like, also like how and why do you choose what you choose to put, especially in such a public, large scale arena? I'd be curious. Yeah.
Oh, my answer is pretty simple. I paint people. I paint their faces. I think what motivated me to that niche was really my grandmother. Oh, this is going to be the battle of grandmothers. They're both passed away. So I like to think that they're like kind of arguing, because I had a grandmother that raised me, but I had a grandmother that inspired my art, and I don't want anyone to get jealous. So shout out to all the grandmas out there. So I had a grandmother who used to draw fairly well, and looking at her work, say around 7 or 8, the goal was always draw better. I think I was always driven by some sort of competition. And so that's kind of how it started, even with my siblings, I'm the youngest of all of my siblings. So when it comes to coloring and just having dexterity, they were always, just a step ahead. But I wanted to hone in on the craft, and I was always just enamored with people's ability to draw people. And I was always enamored by people. So it was a niche that I naturally fell into. And as I get older, I try and find a more poetic way to say that I draw people, you know, I draw their essence draws, no, I draw people because I just like drawing faces. I thought it was, you know, but the more I do it, the more I find meaning in my work, the more I make more complex work, the more I learn about the people who I'm replicating, who I'm memorializing. That's what does it for me, hearing the stories that people have. And a lot of times people come to me to draw their family members or their loved ones, and these people are being canon by another person for the work they've done in someone's life. Everyone is important to someone. And sometimes I like that story, that connection that we all have as people, capturing that humanity. So yeah, that's what my niche is people.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, I paint people too. And that's been some of my biggest muse. But specifically, I think I like to paint people. What I've been painting for a long time, been consistent. I mean, my subjects change, but it's been specifically, you know, people that holds specifically people that are consistently fighting for a more dignified existence. I like to paint people empowered in their power. And I consider myself both kind of like a visual translator and a visual storyteller. And beyond a face tells stories, and their stories essentially is what capture the hearts of the folks and people. And what I'm hoping and in painting them bigger than life is to capture the attention that we are indeed worth of that attention. Because in so many spaces, we're not even given that. So I paint a lot of women, a lot of people of color, and a lot of folks, everyday people, really, who are seeking for a more dignified existence. And I feel like our stories are magic. And, you know, just really seeing the beauty in the mundane is what I like to capture, because sometimes when we're in our everyday rituals, we don't always see the sparkles and the brightness. And I think our resilience is magical. Our existence, just being here, is magical, and it's a story to tell. So my intent is to capture that through the work that I do, and to be able to use those as a platform to continue conversations like that we're having now, to continue growth and learning in order for us to find out more, like, who are these people and what are their stories, and, you know, what are their fight and what are their struggles and what are their victories, and hope that could essentially spark conversation, but also spark change and, you know, really shift our culture, and be cultural catalysts of envisioning the world that we want to live in and the world that we want to see. So I like to think that the paintings and the murals that I create inspire kind of a vision of the world that we're creating right here and right now, but also what we're working towards, you know?
Absolutely.
I had this question later on, but I feel like, yes, this is a perfect moment to just segue into it and just ask of both of you. You know, this last year and a half in particular, right? It's been such a challenging, unusual, meaningful time, right? And for lots of different reasons, and for all of us. And so I'm just curious, because what has also really happened, I'm sure in lots of different places, but particularly here in Portland, is this explosion of like artwork in the streets, particularly of murals. And so for both of you, like, I'm just curious, what is most exciting or challenging, or both, for you about the role of public art in this moment, and as well as the role as artists you both play in your communities?
Absolutely. Cece, would you like to take this first, or?
It doesn't matter, really. Sure, I can go ahead.
Oh, okay, so for me, it's really a call to step up. I think we're in a very privileged position. As artists, we are the historians. You know, we capture the moment, we canonize what's happening in time. A lot of times when we look back on history, aside from the text, there's also the visuals, and we're in charge of setting that. So there is a bit of responsibility we have to be very honest in what's going on. And also, you know, no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. And wherever your gifts lie, in a time where there's uprising, in a time where there's friction, whatever your gift is, you have to lend it to the cause. And that's just an integral part of just being human. You have to somehow lead, give your time, your resources to moving forward for the better. And it's easy to say in hindsight, but history always tells what side you're on. So a lot of times we'll talk about what we do if we lived at this point in time or at that point in time, but we're living now. So it's very important, as disorienting as this time has been, as trying as this time has been, you know, this is where, you know, the diamond in the rough comes out, resilience comes out. And this is where the beauty of struggle has its time to shine. And for me, it's very important that I don't take for granted the gifts that I have and how I should use them to service this point in time. So it's there's a lot that happened in this time that's kind of disheartening, but there's a lot of beauty in it, and community coming together, standing against oppression. We're not tolerating, you know, mistreatment of any disenfranchised groups. There's a lot of community in that. It's been some hardships, but the hardships has brought us together. And I'm thankful for my part and playing my part as the artist, and make sure that I truly canonize what's going on as the historian, because I think that's pretty much what we do as artists. We set it in stone. Yeah.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, definitely, I think part of our work is kind of being markers of time. And that was very, very visible. And we've seen that happen throughout the nation. I mean, this time last year, even when the racial reckoning of this country was happening, just the amount of work that was being put out on the streets, out on the businesses, on plywoods, that was happening out on the actual crosswalks where people walk through and drive through. People were just painting and all this and reclaiming public spaces as a means to share their voice, share their thoughts, share their agony and share their griefs, but also just share common space, especially at a time when social distance have definitely, I think, shifted the way we engage, not only on public spaces, but how we engage with each other. And I think, you know, for some of the work or many of the work that I've created, not only was it a visual imagery of representing what was happening at the time, but he also served as a place where people gathered and where people made altars and the portraits and faces of people that we've lost, but also in portraits of people that are still out here doing the work and fighting and offering what they could offer. Like, it became a place where people gathered and made offerings, and a place where people had conversation and strategized as far as like what we're supposed to do next and where we're trying to go. But it allowed people to come together in different moments in time, you know, because as Kyra was saying, in terms of as people was protesting, people like taking over the streets, what happened after? when that's gone is what are the images left behind, you know? And we were able to be blessed enough to be able to contribute to that and to have our thoughts be given visually out on those spaces. Like I just remember over here in Oakland specifically, I mean, the whole downtown became kind of like a huge exhibition gallery that went on for blocks and blocks and blocks because all the businesses were closed down, plywood's everywhere. I mean, at one point you were walking and there was, I felt like I was imagining haystack just rolling because, you know, we were still trying to figure out how to navigate sheltering in place and being on lockdown. And with everything else that was happening, with Black Lives Matter and the stuff that went down last year, I mean, people just needed to feel like they can contribute and be part of something, and we made that happen. We added colors to what would be a really kind of gloomy town, or what became a gloomy town, because a lot of things were closed and things were not, you know, open in the way that we were used to, and people were outside, whether or not they were protesting or not, but we were able to have a reason to be outside and to actually see messages and visual images of unity and solidarity. And I think that was something that was really beautiful and really historic at this moment. Like people still talk about it, you know, there's still some remnants of those work that are left behind. There's students that I know at UC Berkeley who created like whole website platforms of like ensuring that we have some sort of documentation, because a lot of those plywood businesses reopen again had been taken down, but that we have marked it and it happened, and that we took a stand, and that we weren't just kind of, you know, watching as the world turns, but rather actively participating and engaging within it. So I think that was a beautiful reciprocal kind of thing that had happened. Not only are we putting out to the world what we believe is needed in order for us to create the world that we want to live in, but we were also having an actual space to be able to release kind of just the angst and all the other emotions that piled up given the situation and given the time in which we're in. So, and whether or not that's a role that everyone needs to take on, I don't think is something that, you know, we could say this is a mandatory rule that artists take. I mean, one thing about being an artist is almost like we have a license to be able to create what we choose is relevant and important, and that might vary depending on where you're from. But I think inevitably during our time and where we're at, I find that such a relevant part of what Kyra had mentioned, of like having this gift or the skills, or for me at least, is the actual connections and how we can communicate with it within the communities that we're part of, or the communities that we want to be able to talk to, or the world that we want to engage in, and the world that we want to change. So I think that's very important and relevant. And as Kyra said, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And I know for a fact not all artists want to take that on, but when we do choose to take that on, there's also such an amazing amount of kind of what I said earlier of how it feeds back. You know, it's like knowing how we can engage and knowing how we belong and knowing how we can communicate. It's an amazing relationship that I believe for me have cultivated a lot of sense of feeling like there's a space and place I belong, and that I actually have something, you know, that my voice is important, it's relevant, there's something that I needed to say. So for example, one of the project that we've created and we produced, during a time actually early on this year, when this atrocity of Asian violence was happening in a global sense. And and I mean, especially here in Chinatown in Oklahoma, we felt it was, I mean, it was just ridiculous, like how the violent attack, especially with our elderly, was happening continuously for months. And very little was being mentioned out in the media. And then tension started rising up of like the Black community and the Asian communities. And, you know, here in Oakland, we have such a deep history of the Black Panther and the Yarrow Peril and the solidarity within these different communities. So invited folks of those descent that are highly invested and rooted here to come and paint together. And we created like a mobile mural paint-a-thon for a weekend where we draw images of what solidarity looked like, and you know what and how to put an end on this like outrageous atrocity that was happening within our elders. And I just remember, I mean, and there was a whole panel that we left where we weren't sure if the elders were going to come in this senior housing. There's like an art senior collective of in a public housing that was happening. We had invited them and we had talked to them, but because of the fear that was happening during the time, we weren't even sure if they were coming out, and they were there throughout the whole weekend. And they painted a whole panel where they hadn't left their house for over like 9 months because of the fear of just even stepping into the house of being harmed. And to have them be part of that event and be part of just the creation of the work that happened during that weekend, where those panels, then we kind of created a cube panels for folks to paint on, so it could be mobile and we can put them in different spaces. And then we turned them into lanterns at night. And even at nighttime, they were calling us and it's like, we want to see them and we want to be with you. And we like celebrated rituals. And it just shows just like how powerful coming together can be, but also coming together in creation versus just, you know, we've had vigils, we have cried, and we have, you know, we made our offerings, but to also have a space to actually beyond the grief is like to envision what's next and to envision together what it is that we want to create together. It was just such an amazing, powerful moment for us, not just to, you know, create some amazing pieces of work, but also to actually have conversations on like, what change do we want to see and how are we going to make that happen? So yeah, I think it's definitely, I think how I was raised in the community in which I was at, like mural and collaborative work is, I mean, mural just because it's decisive, it sometimes inevitably becomes, you know, collaborative. I'm 5 foot woman. So it's just like to have that extra hand to reach those higher places and to just have somebody there as you paint. It becomes almost kind of this inevitable practice of collaboration. But again, it's not like something written in any book that's a mandatory thing for all artists to have. But for me, I think that is actually one of the more joyful part of this work is when you actually meet folks you can work with and collaborate with and share a same goal or vision of what it is that you're trying to create. I mean, it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And I think throughout my experience for the decades in which I've been doing this, when you hit that, when you find that, it inevitably becomes this connection and this community and this relationship that gets cultivated, because it's not just like, you know, we're putting up our name so that people can know who we are, but rather we're actually creating a world in which we want to engage in. So that's my feel to it. I mean, I know there's probably a lot of different perspectives.
I am so happy you hit on collaboration, Cece, and also thank you for sharing that. I think it's one of the things I was thinking about was just already how so much of the mural work that well, so many artists, both of you particularly do that is collaborative. Cece, I know you have the collective you're a part of. And then Kyra, I know you just finished a huge mural in downtown Portland that focuses on LGBTQ representation. So I definitely, I'm curious, Cece, I feel like you've definitely hit upon it, but Kyra, for you, like how important is collaboration to your process, and also as a mural maker?
It's very important. I think collaboration is important to life, you know, just us as human beings. There's an African proverb that I love. It's if you want to go fast, go along, but if you want to go far, go together. And that's always been my common go-to philosophy when tackling big works. I'm very family oriented, I'm very friend oriented, and I'm all about togetherness. And I feel like having someone to lean on, having someone to work with, to bounce ideas off of is an efficient way to get things done as a community. And I don't think that's something that is solely for mural work, but just in all aspects of life. So collaborating has been a major part. I don't think I've only had one project I think I've done publicly that I did not collaborate on. So it's been a huge part. It's been so natural. I haven't had to articulate what it's like to collaborate because I don't really know much else unless I'm doing some personal work. But collaboration has always been a huge part. It's just second nature to me.
And I mean, I think I share very similar, like it's something that I really truly enjoy doing, and when it's being done right, it's such a magical, beautiful thing. But I want to be real, like it's not easy.
It ain't.
You know, it's so like there's definitely moments I'm like I've cried on wall because we can't agree on something, you know, and it's just like we're tossing brushes because we can't figure out what to do and what's next and have to move it along, you know. It's I mean, just like any relationship, there's like, even with the same folks, I mean, I'm part of a collective, we've been together for over 15 years now too, and we still go at it, you know. It's not always like, oh, everything's wonderful, everything's great, we know exactly what we're doing. I mean, through the years, we've learned to do it better, but it doesn't make it easier.
Yeah.
And that's just real. I just want to go and touch on that because, you know, for folks who've done any kind of group projects, there's different factors that comes to play. And I think that's important to recognize, but I think it's also what makes the experience what it is, you know, and what allow us to grow. And each time is different, which always comes with inevitably surprises. But given all of that, given the challenges and sometimes the difficulties, I mean, like there's, you know, relationships been dampened and some have been lost because, you know, we're so passionately involved in the work that we're doing. I just can't really imagine it anything different, because I think, at least for me, the world that I'm trying to envision is not with me alone. And like a lot of my work focuses a lot on work of solidarity, both kind of like the actual practice and process, but also like historically, and what we're trying to go is a big portion of my praxis. So it's a learning lesson each time. And as much as I've done it, it's always been kind of, it's sometimes conflicting because as an artist, you know, and I say this when I was a teacher, and I say this also as a public artist who does a lot of collaboration and community engagement. You know, sometimes as an artist, there is moments where I want to be selfish and like be in my own head and try to kind of like reimagine and rethink and kind of figure out and sort it out what it is that I want to do and what I want to create. I mean, I think there's portion of art, especially in this society, where that is such, you know, having that moment in that time and that almost kind of like selfishness to be able to create becomes part of like the practice, but as an educator and as an organizer and as just a community in the forefront of our communities, when you're doing collaboration and collective work, you almost have to be really selfless, because in some ways you're representing things that are not only my story, you know, but this our collective experience. So it does get challenging sometimes. And there's a lot of work and practice, I think, that comes with doing this work in terms of just like how we actually relate to one another. And that is reflected on the work that we create. I mean, I feel like often or not, at least in the work that I've done, like I know and I could tell just based on what project we complete, like I could always reflect back on how the actual process of collaboration through that experience was for me or was for us within the different groups and different people and different artists I've worked with. So, and I've done collaboration with artists, and I've done collaboration with folks who've never like painted a brush before. You know, it's different levels and different levels of expectations and different levels of assumptions and different levels of just, you know, but I think what it is having a shared goal of what it is that we want to create together. And even coming to that is work. And sometimes it's actually the best part of the work.
Yes. Kyra, do you have anything else to add to that?
On the collaborations not being easy, because the truth is it's not, and that just jogged a memory for me. And I know we're going to take questions, but I just want to say this. I always ask myself sometimes, like, why do I continue to collaborate when I know it isn't easy? But the beauty of the outcome, you know, having a baby isn't easy. You know, no one enjoys the labor, but we enjoy the child. You know, I'm reminded of the saying: the harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. Me as a Black woman in public art being my trade, had it not been for me collaborating or rubbing elbows or networking to the people across from me, I would not be where I am. And it's not my interest to get my foot in the door, to be the only one in the room, but for me to hold the door open for other people to get into the room. So collaborations, that's what happens when we collaborate. We share in the wealth, we share in the experience, we share in the knowledge, and that's the beauty of community, because no one does it alone. There's no such thing intrinsically as being self-made. There's always, and sometimes it's the labor of people you don't know, you've never met. It's their sacrifices that also helps you get to where you are. So that's the beauty of collaboration for me. That's the symbol, and it's not easy. But what we create and the opportunities that is so beautiful that all the struggles, all the perils become worth it. And I think that's why it's something I can never throw to the wayside, because it's the reason why I'm here. So yeah, absolutely.
I so appreciate both of you just being real with that. Yes to all of that. I can't believe, so we're 5 minutes till, and it just feels like it went like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna to help facilitate. If there are any questions that folks want to ask right now. And if not, I have one last question that I will ask of you both, and maybe that's the way we will end the evening, but we'll see.
Yeah, please, if you have a question, feel free to turn your mic on or your camera or both and let us know. And if we don't have someone immediately, maybe you could ask your question, Sal, while people think, but let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I will just put it out there in case we don't get anything, but like, I'm curious from both of you, what projects, what things are you looking forward to coming up on the horizon? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, I'm not mute. Well, I'm excited for. I have a few more public arts projects, a few things under contracts that I'm excited to do. Here in Portland, we have a season. When it comes to rain, so it's a lot of work piled on in itself. But I'm excited to get those works completed, and then I'm just excited to just go back to doing, like, when I'm not in mural season, I do personal commissions, and I'm ready to just get in my portrait bag and draw faces and paint faces all day. So I'm ready to get back to just my personal commissions and being in my own private studio, making portraits.
Yeah, no, it's been very busy for me it seems like it's been for a long time, actually. Been very busy. I just finished a couple of publications, doing some illustrations. I was mentioning earlier with Sal, I've been in the studio the past 3 months, mostly doing kind of painting illustration for various publications, including kind of the National Domestic Workers Alliance to a local chef over here doing kind of an autobiographical cookbook, and a couple of different campaigns that's been happening to birthright, to women's right, that just happened the past few months. So I've been pretty much wrapping that up, finishing that up, and coming into fall, which becomes, I live in the Bay Area where the climate is fairly consistent. So our mural season is pretty much all year long. Going to be working a lot and doing big public walls for public housing. There's one here in Oakland, a couple in San Francisco, where working alongside various different neighborhoods and community developers, just really imagining what development looked like, what that can be, and especially at this time where just like migration and transitions of folks and people, especially after this pandemic, has been kind of like buck wild, really. But how we consciously create and provide affordable spaces and not displaced communities. So I've been working a lot with different kind of developers, but nonprofit developers who are very much aware of the need for affordable housing, so that communities who are not, the Bay Area is probably one of the highest, or is the highest property costs and cost of living over here have skyrocketed so much. So many people have been displaced and have moved out, and there's definitely this actions and momentum of folks figuring out how do we, make our place amazing and beautiful and keep our people in it.
I appreciate you sharing that. I know I was one of those folks who come and went years and years ago. I see people are slowly leaving remarks in the chat, a lot of gratitude. I just wanna, I think this is it. Yeah, Anna? Yeah. I just want to thank you both so much for being a part of this conversation. Cece, you had mentioned this when we first talked about this, it's going to go by like that. And sure enough, it's exactly did. So thank you both for sharing your perspectives. Thank you both for just sharing your knowledge as well as your experience. And for those that joined us today, we really appreciate this. Again, this is one conversation of 3. This is in many ways an experiment. We've never done something like this before. This has been amazing and awesome. And also, I'm really happy it's finished. So,
Salvador, thank you so much for moderating.
Yes, thank you both, Anna and Salvador, for putting it together, and Kyra. So, it's such a pleasure. This is my second time actually having conversation with you, and it's amazing, and I'm excited to get down and collaborate and go multi-city wide. But also for the rest of y'all, please feel free to get in contact with both of us. Our social media was shared. I'm not always super responsive, but I do respond. You might take days, but I do respond. So if y'all too shy to ask questions and want to know more, or just feel the pulse of what's happening, feel free to hit us up.
Or if you're in Portland and want to collaborate, hit me up. Hit me up. I appreciate
Yes.
everyone for coming out. Really do.
Thank you both so much. And yes, thank
Yes.
you to everyone who joined us. Really, this was wonderful.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.